Hey everyone, welcome to Locked On Lakers for Wednesday. Brian Kamenetzky, Andy Kamenetzky. The Lakers will be a little bit shorthanded as they play a crucial game tonight against the Heat. That's next.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks to everybody for making Locked On Lakers first listen of every day, Monday through Friday, no matter how or where you get your podcasts. This one's always going to be free and never, ever, ever behind a paywall. Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you can go hang out with over 27,000 subscribers to the channel, Andy, all of whom are still real angry about what happened on Monday when the Lakers played, kind of returned to action, played the Spurs, played a pretty good game until about 4 minutes left in the third quarter, and then played about, I don't know, what is that, 16 minutes of god-awful basketball and ended up losing by more than 20. So people still upset about that, to say the very least, Andy.
Well, it's the second consecutive loss by 20-plus points, but also, too, I think it's the way that they lost that feels indicative of things that we've seen over what's now a 3-game losing streak, but also things that have periodically popped up throughout this season that has led to a lot of Laker fans being upset about this team in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, it was, the sort of, I've seen a bunch of different versions of it, like to the point people are angry enough that they kind of forget that, the Lakers actually were winning that game by 10 points at the 4-minute mark of the third. And it's like, I don't think that makes it better. They didn't get blown out from wire to wire. It's like this annoyance that they can't, the level of inconsistency and the inability, I think, to me, in sort of thinking about it, looking back at some of the game, we sometimes watch them twice and whatever, the inability to get things back on the rails after they start to go south, that to me is what really stuck out. It's like, okay, the defense is collapsing, the offense, turning the ball over too much. Wrong guys maybe are in the game. Like, somebody needs to do something to bring the group back together, count to 5, and get back into the game. And it just didn't happen. It was like, we're great, and then boom, and we've totally collapsed.
I think if this felt like a one-off, you would have Laker fans unhappy about this, but able to maintain some degree of perspective. The problem is it doesn't feel like a one-off. And we've seen a lot over the course of this season that if you hit this team a couple times, it is not a guarantee that they're going to fight back. It is not a guarantee that they're going to hit back. And the idea that when things go wrong, they can grow catastrophic, I think from the perspective of a lot of Laker fans, and it's something I know I've talked about before, and I believe it came up in Tuesday's show. It's the idea that it doesn't always feel like they are resolved as a group to get it back in the first place and to put out the necessary fight to even try. Like it's something that I talked about during Lakers Talk, the show that I do for ESPN LA 710 weekly, was this was a potential moment for the Lakers to really feel like they were rising up and playing for LA at a time when things are just absolutely awful in this city with all these fires across Los Angeles that are still an issue that needs, we're a long way from them being contained before we even start talking about the city going into recovery. And, it came on a night where the Rams had to go to Arizona to play their playoff game against the Vikings. And they ended up playing a terrific game. And it was something that they talked about heading into it. They felt not even just an opportunity, but like a responsibility to play this way for the city and try to give LA something that they can be galvanized around, something that they can root for, feel good about. And then when you compare that against the second half with the Lakers, and I want to make it clear, I'm not even talking about the result, because the Lakers could have felt like they were showing up for LA even if they lost. Like, you can sometimes play a good game and lose, you can sometimes play a bad game, but feel like you were 100% committed. In the second half of that game, it did not feel like they were committed, both big picture for the season itself, or small picture for that game and the context of what that game meant, to say nothing also about Michael Cooper being honored in franchise history. I think that's something.
By the way, the org screwed up the T-shirts on the seats. Whoever was in charge of it didn't notice, and they screwed it up. It happens, and but it's just embarrassing. It was just like a bad thing that kind of happened on a bad night anyway. If they win that game by 15, we joke about the shirts and talk about how the Lakers, like you say, kind of did the thing for LA. And I'm not putting it on them in the sense of like they let down the city. Like, you got to like I don't want to make it like trite or like cliche or like to kind of minimize the thing about saying like they're going to be fixed by a basketball game, the people who have suffered this loss. But there is a certain amount of, I think what it speaks to, if I'm understanding, and I certainly wouldn't disagree, we talked about focus, whether you want to call it focus, whether you want to talk about, being too casual, urgency, whatever it is.
Detail.
In that stretch where they were playing really well and the defense was top 10 in the league, top 5 in the league, top in the league, for a lot of that stretch. The one thing that defined them is just how hard they played on that end. And some of that you can just see, like you can just tell when they're, not that they're loafing now, but like whatever that next gear was, it was not there in the last 16 minutes of this game on Monday. And there was no ability to put things back on the rails.
I mean, this gets back to my season-long complaining about the switch 1 through 5 approach that they had temporarily abandoned, not coincidentally, when the team was playing good defense. They've started falling back into it, not coincidentally, when the defense has started to get worse. But among the things that I don't like about it is I don't think this team has the collective personality for it. Because if you're going to play it that way, it requires a collective urgency and motor and a determination to get, in terms of physicality, it requires a determination in terms of minding details. It's getting back to spots. It's about doing this in a way that feels intentional and with purpose. And this is, I'm not saying that this is a group that I think doesn't care about winning, because I think they do. But this is not a high urgency collective personality for this team. Like there's a lot of laid back. I think in a lot of ways it begins with LeBron and AD. Like LeBron is in season, we know this, season 22, 40. There's a certain degree of pacing, yada, yada, yada. And he's also the most been there. He's one of the most been there, done that guys in the history of sports, much less the NBA, which makes the regular season, I think, more difficult for him to get up for. And while I think AD generally plays on a game-to-game basis harder than LeBron, you do sometimes see that slippage with AD as well. And his personality is not rah-rah that way. It is exactly. Not a high-motor personality. And for the most part with this group, I feel like if you give them an opportunity to dial it back, they're going to take it.
Well, I hate the term energy player in the way that it can denigrate players or make it can be reductive.
We covered Ronny Turioff, man. He
hated that.
Hated that term.
So but when in the next segment, I want to talk about though what the issue they have around energy is, because I think what you're talking about with personalities is really important for kind of getting into that equation. So we'll do that next.
Locked on Lakers is brought to you by Hunger Root. And when it comes to grocery shopping and meal planning, I've had this ongoing problem. It's called time. I don't have it between work, life, trying to eat healthier, which is actually something I'm very, very into. But everything changes if you go with Hungry Root. It's a game changer. I've used it and the meals are awesome. It is an easy way to eat healthy without the stress, and they take care of grocery shopping. They recommend meals and groceries based on your taste, my health goals, from anti-inflammatory to high protein, gluten-free options. And the best thing is every meal is ready in 15 minutes or less. So you can get on with your day, eat healthy, and handle all the other stressful items in your life, and you don't have to worry about your meals. You're going to love Hungry Root as much as I have. For a limited time, get 40% off your first box and a free item in every box for life. Just go to hungryroot.com/LockedOnNBA. Use the code LockedOnNBA. That's hungryroot.com/LockedOnNBA. Code NBA LockedOnNBA for 40% off the first box and a free item of your choice for life. hungryroot.com/LockedOnNBA. Code LockedOnNBA. Don't miss out.
So with this 3-game slide, Andy, the game tonight against a very ordinary Miami team that I'm not going to say they're going through some of their own things, but they're kind of going through some of their own things. This is a really important game. I mean, oh my, like you've got to take, the schedule only kind of gets harder as the season goes along. They're still in this home heavy stretch before they leave on the road trip at the end of the month. Like you can't afford not to win home games against a blah Miami team, especially given how Monday's game ended. Like, come on, like you got to come out with something in this one.
Especially too, Miami's not going to have Jimmy Butler. He's still going to be suspended. The Lakers are going to have the extra obstacle, perhaps, of Dorian Finney-Smith not being available. He's listed as doubtful for personal reasons. But the Lakers should be capable of winning this game and, quite frankly, need to win this game more than the Heat do. Like, the Heat is waves arms around in terms of all the bleep they got to figure out right now that has, in some ways, little to do with the actual basketball court. The Lakers are still, for the time being, a team that should be able to focus on the court. And we've talked about the importance of capitalizing on January. They've blown already a couple games that should have been banked. They have to get themselves back on track. And if anything, find a game like, say, next week versus Boston, where you got to beat those odds to make up for the one you crapped away.
Get one back. I don't like to. I don't like to put too much into individual games because it is a long season. There's a ton of ebb and flow. Things are always happening that impact the way a team looks. In terms of how they play from any night to night that we don't always even know about. That said, you talk about that. You made in the first segment that point that a team can play poorly, but you can tell they're still like invested in what they're doing. They're playing as hard as they can. Sometimes it just doesn't work. At the very least, I need to see that. I need to see a team that shows up and looks like a professional team that believes that it really is playing for a purpose this year. And that doesn't mean they're necessarily going to win. Who knows? Tyler Hero catches a hot streak. Haywood Highsmith does something you don't expect, or Nikola Jovic, like they've got that, the one that isn't the Jokic, but the other guy. Like, strange things happen, but put in a professional effort the entire game. And if you can't do that on the heels of what happened in the last 16 minutes on Monday, that is a major red flag, even in a time when there are a fair amount of red flags around this team anyway.
Well, I mean, it raises the larger question of what does this season even mean? What should Rob Pelinka and the okays that he gets from Jeannie Buss to make whatever moves, like how big of an investment do you make if it feels like almost halfway through the season you can't take the temperature of this team consistently just to figure out, are they going to mentally show up? Like, are they committed to fighting for 48 minutes on a regular basis? Like, regardless of the results, like, are they going to be in it from an investment standpoint? And look, there are a lot of things going on with this team right now on both sides of the ball that I think require addressing. There's, I think, an element of getting back to basics. I would say, number one, start getting back to an offense that, again, revolves around Anthony Davis, like you did for the first 14 games of the season when you were 10-4 and AD looked like an MVP candidate. And we were talking about the potential upside of this team, and they were harder to guard and they looked more functional. And if you start doing that, combined with, I think, a better approach defensively and more commitment that way, and an offense that will frankly make your defense easier to play. But this gets back to investment too, because that requires discipline. Like, it requires a commitment to the steps and to not looking for shortcuts or workarounds for every step of your offense, and every time you're supposed to remember to cut, or every screen you're supposed to set, or, you know, running things methodically, as opposed to what it's felt like often, I think, for all of D'Lo's faults. He was one of the guys that avoided this, I think, the most. Like, D'Lo would often look to just run an offense. Like, I think more than LeBron, certainly more than Austin, I think D'Lo looked to actually run the offense that they were supposed to be doing. He definitely looked for Anthony Davis very frequently. They need to get back to more of what was working early on, and then you combine the defense that you discovered.
It's, you know, we talk a lot with LeBron, and we'll get to a couple things with LeBron in the third segment, but we talk a lot with LeBron about, you know, beyond the physical, you know, difficulties and stuff that go along with trying to play in your 22nd year and the mileage and this and that, whatever, the mental focus that it takes for him to achieve at a high level is significantly higher than what it took before, because he is compensating for athleticism. You know, it was a little bit slower, not quite as bouncy. You can't do it every night in the same way. Need to go deeper into the bag and all that kind of stuff. It's hard, and like that, as much as anything, could be the thing that gets you say, you know, I just don't want to do it anymore. You know, I am tired. I'm tired of doing this, and I just don't want to I want to spend my mental energy on other things. The Lakers, I think, as a team, are in kind of a similar boat, because you talk about the attention to detail, like, go back to the basics, make sure you're not getting away from Anthony Davis too much, make sure you're running an offense that really is centered around him, no pun intended, and all of these things, and setting an effective screen and fighting over the screen, switching at the right time, not every time, like all these things for the Lakers to be competitive, because the bench isn't filled with a bunch of, you know, really high level scorers, and because they are,
there's one way to fix that.
Yeah, I know there is. We can talk about that, but like, and because there is, you know, there are holes in the lineup. There are holes in the rotation. It's not the most talented thing you're gonna find out there, but when they are dialed in and they do that, but that's hard. That is really hard to do. And it's hard to do that for 48 minutes. And then it's hard to do that for a week. And then it's hard to do that for a month. And it's hard to do that for 2. But to be a good team, you got to play well for 2 months at a time, not 2 weeks at a time.
Well, here's the other thing too. This team has no other choice, because they are not talented enough to coast on their talent. They're not athletic enough to coast on their athleticism. Like, they have to play with a requisite level of high energy on both sides of the ball, and execution on both sides of the ball, because they don't have enough stuff to paper over the things they're not doing.
I agree.
They just don't have it.
And that's a really difficult way to have to play. But it reflects that is a reflection of the roster that they have, the one that Rob Pelinka put together, and then has to decide now if he wants to try and improve. So let's talk a little bit about LeBron, a little bit about DFS and his absence, what that means for tonight, and a couple other things when we get back.
Locked on Lakers is brought to you by Wayfair. After the holiday hustle, there's nothing like giving your home a little TLC, a makeover, a little treat, and for many people, decluttering and refreshing their space helps them get back into a routine, a little feng shui. And whether you're tidying up or clearing out or just want to give your space a new look to start the year, Wayfair has everything you need all within your budget. Like, I am looking actually for a little bit of new furniture and around our place, change up the energy a little bit. And their huge selection at Wayfair makes it easy to find pieces that fits my style, fits my budget, and Wayfair is really helpful in the process. Best part is hassle-free delivery and free delivery, free and hassle-free, even for the larger items. And again, it's an easy site to navigate. You're going to find whatever you want in no time. You're going to enjoy the experience with Wayfair. So give your home the refresh it needs with Wayfair. Head to wayfair.com right now. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home.
Make sure you are checking out the Postcast with Dave Palais after every game. So tonight there will be a Postcast with Dave Palais. And then sign up for the daily newsletter, lockedondaily.com. Go click on Locked On Lakers. You get the show. You get NBA analysis from around the league and across the network sent straight to your inbox every day. So that makes this whole process seamless, Andy. So do that. And if by doing it directly when you hear it from us, it actually does help us out. So we appreciate that. It's, you had mentioned that it might be time to hit the button, the Dorian Finney-Smith for Rui Hachimura button. Well, they can't do it tonight because DFS probably. I'm assuming the guys are doubtful. I assume they're not going to play.
Just want to make sure people understand he's not officially listed as out.
Right. And it is as a personal as opposed to an injury. So, I guess that does change potentially, his availability. This can, this can make Miami's not a high flying offensive team, but you are now removing again one of their higher, better wing defenders, arguably they're the best one in the front court, and asking Rui to do more, asking Reeves to do a little bit more, going back to a formula they've seen before, but it's going to be more difficult. It's even more of a reason that they have to have their bleep together and keep it together for 48 minutes.
I had planned when you and I were prepping for the show to talk about, yet again, pressing the button, the need to flip-flop DFS and Rui in the lineup. And that quite possibly may not happen for tonight's game. But when, in fact, DFS is available and you have this option, there are a multitude of reasons that I think it needs to happen, which we've gone over a lot. But it underscores, and this can take place tonight, the need to involve Rui more, period. Like I'd mentioned during that period where the Lakers were 10-4 and AD was the hub, and AD also was clearly the leader in usage on this team. It was at a little over 31. Since the 10-4, he's gone down to about 28.5. LeBron has risen up to team leader during that period. Austin Reeves's has gone up a few. Rui's has just plummeted. And to put this in perspective, during the 10-4 start, again, that the Lakers really looked like they were potentially a good team, particularly if they could clean up their defense, Rui was averaging almost 11 shots a game. In January, he's averaging 7 shots a game, like fewer than Max Christie. And I think everydayers know I'm big on Christie. I wanted him to play for a long time. It makes no sense for Rui to be taking fewer shots than Max Christie. And it makes no sense to have Rui on this roster, much less on the court, if you're going to be involving him that little with his best skill set, which is scoring. But also I think this matters because the more Rui is involved, I think it is kind of an avatar for everybody being involved more. And the offense looking more egalitarian the way it did earlier in the season when it was less predictable, less, automatic high screen and roll, less stagnant, less guys standing around, harder to defend. So that's something that I think you can start that tonight too, because DFS isn't playing, somebody has to take those shots. Also, too, one other thing when you start thinking about the bench, because we've talked about D'Lo's absence and a trickle down effect and the lack of ball handlers. I would like to see JJ give Shake Milton 10-ish minutes a night, because I think they just need another NBA player who part of his job is to handle the ball. Like, I'm not seeing him as a facilitator. I'm not saying he's a floor general. I'm just somebody that I think can keep the trains running more than, say, Cam. And I don't mean this as a knock on Reddish. This isn't the lane he's supposed to fill in the first place. But especially right now, whatever you're getting from Cam defensively is not offsetting what you're not getting offensively, whether from him or the group at large. I feel like Shake can actually fill more of a need for them right now, like a very specific need. I would like to see 10, 15 minutes tops. I think it could be helpful.
Yeah, it's an interesting case. Like, he is, I'm going back to it. You got to go back to the Monday, the 23rd. So before Christmas, to where he was over 50% from the field. He was on Christmas, he was 2 for 4. But since then, he's gone 1 for 3, 0 for 3, 1 for 3, 1 for 2, 0 for nothing in 4 minutes against Houston. And then in 15 minutes against San Antonio, he was 1 of 7. So you're talking about that's 8 points, 10 points since Christmas. And he's not playing 25 minutes a night, but he's not playing 5 either. And so, part of the problem the Lakers have is, like you almost have a similar situation with Rui and Reddish as mirror opposites of the same problem. Like, you need a certain amount of defensive support to allow Rui to really flourish and focus on the stuff he's really good at. It'd be better if he could do the other things as well, improve the defense, become a better rebounder. We talked about it. What was the number? 5 rebounds over his last 3 games. It's not very many. If you're 6'8", 245.
5 rebounds against Texas.
Right. And that's only 5 more than you and I have. We're terrible rebounders and we're very short. Mm-hmm. It's hard to get the most out of Reddish or Rui when you feel like the defense is really suffering, because there's that pull, I think, a lot of times to just take him off the floor, or you have to put him in different combinations where he can't kind of cook as much or whatever it might be. Reddish, it's hard to use Cam when the team isn't scoring, because he makes things much worse in that regard. And I understand he's playing hard and he's the lane, like you say, is defense. But what we're really starting to see, and another reason I think to start DFS, or at least why he's going to be important, is he has skill on both sides. He's a good shooter. He moves the ball reasonably well. He doesn't make a lot of mistakes, picks his time to put the ball on the floor and does stuff. He's not super dynamic, but he knows his lane. He stays in it. And then meanwhile, he plays defense. Christie is starting to look a little bit more like a two-way player, but they still have a lot of guys on the roster who kind of qualify as one-way dudes. And I'm including LeBron in this equation with all the asterisks and the understanding that go along with it. He is still on many nights essentially a one-way player. And then on a night like Monday, they didn't get enough. Like 18's not enough for LeBron. Like they got 60 points. We got a great note from people. I'll try to pull it up, but in consecutive, somebody getting all over us for not being critical of LeBron, AD, and Reeves. And like, guys never criticize him. And then the reply was, no, they always blame things on LeBron. You must be new here. So clearly we're actually doing it right. But like we spent some time on this on for Tuesday. Like, those 3 guys have to be productive offensively. And if LeBron isn't going to be productive night to night defensively, and I get why, then he really does need to be putting up 25 or 20, 11, and 11 or whatever it might be. It can't be 18 and 8 with 7 turnovers. Just can't.
No. And you can't, for that matter, have Austin Reeves shooting like 30% from the field with even 4 turnovers against 8 assists, because you start accounting for those empty shots. And I remain very concerned, if not convinced, that there's just too much on Austin's plate for the level of player that he's at, which is a good player. Like, what they are asking of Austin is basically all-star level or higher. Like, I don't think people often really think about just how good you have to be the third most important player, the third best player on a team that is capable of making, at minimum, a deep playoff run.
They need to find ways to protect him. If they're going to ask him to have this elevated burden offensively, all this keeps putting him. It's like the only guy is like, look, sorry, AD, you're gonna have to do it on both ends, just how it's gonna have to be. But they need to figure out ways to protect him at least some. Like, he is, it's not that he won't try, but like when he gets put on the post because San Antonio is able to match up Hunt and get what they want.
Well, they're not even able to match up Hunt. They're being offered the matchup.
Right. But even,
the Lakers play
even if regardless, if it's because they're switching too much, or if it's just, the way, like Wemby.
They do everything short of saying, who would you like to guard you?
Right. But it's like, they can do some stuff by pulling AD away from the basket in terms of, because Wemby has to be guarded 30 feet away and all that. There's a lot going on there.
He doesn't have to be guarded by side conversation. I don't think he has to be guarded by AD.
Maybe not. But
if Wemby's going to take
my point is,
footers, let him.
Sure. All I'm saying is teams are going to make adjustments over the course of the game. And one of the things the Lakers are always going to need to be conscious of is making sure that you don't end up in a situation like they were in on Monday, where over and over and over again, you have this mismatch in a place on the floor where there's just not much Reeves can do about it. And so whether that's, they have to respond faster to these sort of mini emergencies on the floor.
And that's a JJ thing.
Sure.
I mean, that is on JJ Redick to make those adjustments. And I think also not be stubborn with some of the things. I mean, coaches do this all the time. They get stubborn. But we are starting to see from JJ at times, I think, again, not unique to coaches, the tendency to want to coach the team that you want as opposed to the team that you have. Mm-hmm. And JJ, like everybody else, he's going to have to fight that. Otherwise, he becomes part of the problem like everyone else.
Yeah, it's a fine line between sort of trying to get guys to play into a system that you think is most effective and will be most effective for them, and forcing that, in a way that doesn't work. I mean, and I'm sure, like, no coach likes to switch everything unless you have a roster that's just like perfect for it. And most teams don't. You do it often because you feel like it's the best solution for your team, because you kind of have to cover over deficiencies. But either way, when they're not getting the results. And so, it has to be different, where even if you tend to switch, it can't always be that easy. And so we'll see what happens tonight, Andy, because the Miami Heat are in town, and this is a very winnable game, and it's a game the Lakers really need to win, because that's just how it is. This is the place we are in the season, and this is the games on the schedule that they have to put in the bag if they expect to be somewhere in the spring. So we'll be back after the game. Postcast will be back. Sign up for the newsletter. We'll see everyone after the game.